Stream. Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, April 22nd, I believe. Yes, April 22nd, 2018. It's the Gold, Goats, and Guns half hour here on YouTube. My name's Tom Luongo. I hope you guys are having a great weekend. Decided to pop in on a Sunday morning and let's do some discussion as to what's actually happening in the world of geopolitics. I've got a lot to cover today, a lot of stuff I want to talk about at length. So let's get right to it. You see it in the title for today's talk. We want to talk about Hungary. We want to talk about Brexit. And we want to talk about Macron. So today is all going to be about the European Union and European politics and all of that happy jazz. If you have any questions, just pop them over into the chat. I'll be happy to address them as they come up. So let's get started. So I saw a report this morning on the Durin. It's in the links down below that there is a massive street protest happening in Budapest right now against Viktor Orban's anti-NGO law that's attempting to go. I guess they've passed and they're going to put it into effect. Now, for those of you who don't know the background on this, obviously, George Soros, Mr. Regime Change himself, Mr. Color Revolution himself, has been fighting a losing battle against Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, for a few years now. Orban has come out completely against anything having to do with Soros and their plan and the EU's plan to flood, which they have, flood all of Europe, not just the countries that have been flooded so far, but all of Europe with more refugees from North Africa, Syria, and whatnot. It's all been part of a coordinated effort to destroy cultural integrity of Europe. I saw a great tweet this morning. Part of the reason why they've done this is they really do feel that there's a demographic cliff that Europe is facing in terms of not having enough workers going forward. Well, that's interesting because I saw a great tweet this morning with if they're that worried about it, and came from Voice of Europe, as a matter of fact, I think, which is a great Twitter feed, which if you don't follow Voice of Europe, you should. And said, well, why are you so worried about, there not being enough people to man factories in Europe when there's millions of Spanish, Italians, French, Portuguese, they're all out of work, Greeks, they're all out of work. They're all willing to work for nothing, especially under this situation. But, the point is not that, right? The point is that economic policy has just destroyed Europe. And now they're going to destroy the cultural fabric of Europe as well by importing millions of people who are incompatible with European history and European culture. And Viktor Orban stands most vocally athwart that, to a lesser extent the Poles and the Czechs and even the Austrians and others. But really it's been Viktor Orban who has publicly outed George Soros as the problem, ran a re-election campaign based on don't let Soros win here in Hungary. The idea of shutting down Central European University, which is a Soros-backed NGO. And the new law is that they're proposing in the wake of Orban's 68% majority that they took in the Hungarian parliament 2 weeks ago will force a 25% tax on all foreign money coming into the country for all NGOs, along with revealing where the source of the money is, where the source of the money comes from. And so what Soros has done now, and Soros says, oh, well, we're not leaving Hungary yet. If the law passes, we'll move to Germany, all this stuff. He's not going to give up. This man does not give up. He just says, because he has a God complex, and you have to understand that he's openly said he has a God complex, and this is what he wants the world to look like. And he's a very powerful man who's going to wind up broke. And I'm dead serious when I say that. Because he's going to lose. Because he's one man that can spend a lot of money, but he can't win. Though he thinks he can win by rigging the game, because that's what currency manipulators like him do. They rig the game, and then they use that as validation for their methodology to go forward. But at the end of the day, you can only manipulate people, and you can only manipulate markets. I've learned this the hard way, in the direction that they want to go. You cannot manipulate them against the trend. And the trend absolutely in Europe is for nationalism. It is not for greater internationalization and greater, for lack of a better term, miscegenation of Europe. It's just not going to happen. That's not what's happening. You can see it all across the political spectrum, from the most open societies in Europe, like the Austrians, like the Germans, to the most closed, like the Hungarians. Everybody's saying no to this. So Soros is funneling millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns across the Western world to maintain control over governmental systems that he used to be able to bribe off for millions. Now it's going to cost him hundreds of millions. Then it's going to cost him billions. At some point, you run out of money. At some point, yeah, okay, so Open Society Foundation got an $18 billion injection of capital last year when he transferred $18 billion of his wealth to Open Society Foundation, and invested conservatively at 8%. That means they've got a $1.3 billion annual budget injection. If they just spend the interest off of $18 billion every year, just invested at 6-7%. I mean, it's like you can't get 7-8% with that kind of money. Of course you can. You can probably get more than that. In a kind of passive investment scheme, honestly, all you have to do is pass through that money into its past. He doesn't even have to reinvest it. It's just sitting there. All it has to do is change ownership. So it's not even going to move markets. It didn't even move markets because it didn't have to be sold and then rebought. But I digress. So we've got what, 50 to apparently somewhere between 50 and 100,000. I've seen this from skeptical sites like the Durham about the size of the protests. So they've obviously been able to mobilize 50 to 100,000 people in Hungary, a country of what, about 11 million people, onto the streets of Budapest to protest that they want their democracy back, that they want that Viktor Orban give up your democracy. It's so ridiculous. It's not even funny. It's so transparent. It's not even funny. They just held an election with record voter turnout that in droves, Hungarians voted against this. And so what, the 100,000 people that voted for this all showed up at one time outside of the Hungarian parliament to say, we want our democracy back? Like, what? This is not going to work. Okay, but that's all they've got. It's like the Democrats continuing to double down on their failed strategy to blame everything on Russia and WikiLeaks for Donald Trump's election. Case in point, the lawsuit that they filed on Friday. Tom Perez is out there. The DNC chair, Tom Perez, is out there literally like wondering how he can go bigger because they don't have any other options. They have to either go big or go home, because if they give up on it, the whole thing collapses, and they don't have a fundraising base at this point. And it's the same thing for guys like Soros. He's not going to give up without a fight. Okay. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, the money's going to dry up because no more money can actually come into the country. And if it does, all you're doing is strengthening the Hungarian budget. So at the end of the day, this is going to end badly for Soros in Hungary. The election confirmed that. And that's simply the way it's going to be. And no matter how much he tries to push the narrative in the media and push and push things to its crisis point, it's not going to work, because literally 5 million Hungarians voted against George Soros 2 weeks ago. 70% voter turnout, and 68% of those people. So literally what? 49% of Hungarians, nearly a plurality of Hungarians. And if you actually stop it, he's going to actually break that down. It's even a greater percentage of eligible voters voted against this. It's an insane number. Green Penguin says he's going to have to pay larger and larger percentages for these, larger and larger numbers for these protests. That's exactly my point. That at some point, you can't bribe people on ideological terms. Now you have to start paying more people $25 an hour to show up, $50 an hour to show up. You got to pay you got to work harder to get your enforcers to show up and organize these people. And it's the same thing here in the United States. I mean, look, I don't comment, for example, on like the Million Woman March and the march against gun control and all this stuff, because it's pretty obvious that Soros and the DNC can organize anywhere from 250 to 500,000 people in the United States to show up twice a year in Washington and protest something. Pick a topic, I don't care, whatever the hell it is, whatever they think is going to move the needle today, they can get 500,000 people into Washington, D.C. It's not hard. I mean, it's the same 250 to 500,000 people for the most part. It's not the same people every time, but it's 80% of the crowd is exactly the same. Okay, and that's that, and that's what they can organize. These protests are not getting bigger. We're not seeing a real million-person march in Washington, right? We're not seeing crowds of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million people in Washington, D.C. We're seeing a couple 100,000 to 500,000 people maximum. It's the same people over and over again. There's just enough money amongst those people and coming from Open Society and other NGOs to pay for people's plane and bus fare to get them up there, and lodging to get them organized and get them up there. Fine. There's that many ultra triggered people in the United States. That's it. It's a country of 335 million people, most of whom are armed. Name of the thing: gold, goats, and guns. Do you think I'm worried about this? Do you think you should be worried about it? To be honest with you, you shouldn't spend 5 minutes thinking about it. You should actually laugh and just scroll through your Twitter feed and go, not even counter tweets to it, because it's not even worth it. Don't spend the energy. What's the point? Spend energy on stuff that matters. Okay. All right. So Viktor Orban's got his work cut out for him, but the trend is on his side, so I'm really not that worried about it. Moreover, it feeds into how desperate the powers that be in Europe are, because we can see just how desperate they are to stop Brexit. Read a great article this morning. It's in the liner notes for this show, from BrexitCentral.com, going over all of the latest stuff from Brexit. And there's two main issues right now that the EU is trying to bamboozle everybody with. One is the Irish border, which is nonsense. I have one word for the EU: Switzerland. You've got a border with Switzerland, you make it work. You can have a border with Ireland, and you can make it work. So grow up, get over yourselves, and move on. But they won't, because they don't want to. One, the Irish border, and then two, the customs union. And that Theresa May, who is, as I predicted a month ago when the Skripal poisoning first, 6 weeks ago, honestly, when the Skripal poisoning story began to escalate, I said in a very widely published article that the Skripal poisoning is designed to scuttle Brexit. It's designed to take down the May government. And we had a vote in the House of Lords to effectively give them control over the Brexit process last week. Now we've got the House of Commons wanting to do the same thing. There's at least 10 Tories, and she's only got a 1-seat majority thanks to the DUP and her own incompetence, or was it, to do the same thing. And basically, they want to remove control of the Brexit negotiations away from the Prime Minister, away from the Brexit negotiator. They want control of it. They don't want the people having control over it. They want to control it, which is an obvious coup against the May government. And by her being forced or pushed into putting pressure on everybody over the Skripal poisoning and then the Syria attacks. She's been a hawk on both of those things, both of those issues. Now makes her look incompetent. In the same way that her snap elections last year made her look incompetent. The whole point was to make her look incompetent so that her government can fall. Or at the very least, the Tories can maintain the government, get rid of her, and move somebody in and have them and have the whole process be hijacked by the political class. On top of other issues that they get, other wins they get along with that. But that's one angle on the Skripal poisoning, the Syria strikes, and all of that. Brexit's very important. It's trillions of dollars at stake, Brexit. Okay? There's 70 years worth of European integration. This is a project that's been going on for over 2 generations. And these people will not be denied. The same way that Syria will not be destroyed. This is a policy that the Israelis and the United States and the Brits and the French and everybody else has wanted for years. The Saudis and the Turks and the Qataris, everybody's wanted to destroy Syria for 40 years. Maybe not all of them, but certainly the main players have. And then they've bribed all these other people in order to get involved. Well, you can have a pipeline. You can have a pipeline. Pipelines for everybody. That's how they got Qatar involved. That's how they got Saudi Arabia involved. That's how they got Turkey involved. Turkey was, promised the northern strip of Syria in order to prevent a Kurdish enclave, a Kurdish strip that would have access to the Eastern Mediterranean, with which the Iraqis could push an oil gas. Not the Iraqis, but the Iraqis and the Iranians could push in a gas pipeline. The Kurds are happy to get that revenue. So that's what this is all about, okay? And then we have Macron, French President Emmanuel Soyboy Macron, in the news very prominently pushing his case for being the leader of the EU. It's very obvious that last year's Fortress Merkel plan failed because the German electorate truly rejected Merkel. Once Trump came to power, there was a definite shift in the media that was trying to create this idea of Angela Merkel being the leader of the free world. And then she got whacked in her election, in her re-election campaign, and was only barely able to, with a lot of arm twisting, put together any kind of grand coalition government with the Social Democrats. By the way, the new leader of whom, or most likely leader of whom, is going to be an absolute nightmare for her. Because watch Andrea, the name is Andrea Nahles. Nahles, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. I'm not German. She's going to be a nightmare for Merkel. She's angling to become prime minister or chancellor after Merkel leaves the scene. She's hell-bent on rebuilding the Social Democrats, meaning she's really going to be in charge of German domestic policy because Merkel's not going to be able to make a move. And so obviously what's happening now is that the powers that be behind Merkel have now shifted their allegiance away from her towards Macron, because now Macron is the one out there saying, I was able to influence Trump to not leave Syria. We have to stay in Syria forever. And all this fucking horse shit. I was like, I do a very bad French accent, but then again, I fucking hate Macron, so I don't give a shit. And I don't like this guy. He's obviously Mr. Establishment He's obviously Sarkozy 2.0. I mean, he's literally, or Hollande 2.0. He's literally the worst thing that could have happened to France, and the biggest betrayal of the populist movement headed by Marine Le Pen last year. And in the same way that Brexit is being betrayed, the populist wave against traditional French politics is being betrayed. And for how long they can keep this going, we don't know. But for at this point, this is what we're seeing. So Macron is out there pushing for an army of Europe, of course, because they need to be able to put down any populist uprisings across Europe. They want some degree of independence in case the coup against Donald Trump truly does fail, which I don't think it is, but in case it does fail, they want the European Union to lead the free world and not the United States. They actually they're still on track to destroy the United States via various bad trade deals and the TPP and the Paris Accord and all that crap. It's all designed to destroy American competitiveness overseas and make Europe to defend Europe. Okay. And so Macron is out there saying, on the eve of his meeting with Trump, because he's going to meet with Trump early this week, and then Merkel's going to meet with Trump later in the week at the White House. And so Macron is out there really tooting his own horn, saying how important his position is on Syria. Basically, he's saying the same thing the French have been saying from the beginning: destroy Syria, get rid of Assad, and all of it, and that he's the one that's actually been able to manipulate Trump or influence Trump into staying, which is nonsense. Okay, that's patent nonsense. And as a matter of fact, I think that's going to backfire on Macron badly. Trump has zero respect for Emmanuel Macron. We saw it in their first meeting. The way he treated Macron was quite dismissive. Of course, Macron, being an arrogant Frenchman, treated Trump pretty much the same way. Difference is that Macron leads France. And France is a basket case. But Macron is not experienced enough to understand that he's being used. And he still thinks that the people who are the powerful people behind the European project and the destruction of the United States as we currently know it aren't nearly as powerful as they think they are, because this populist movement is actually gaining steam. It's actually getting worse for them, and they understand it. And that's why they're acting so desperately. That's why they're pushing all of this stuff to its crisis point as quickly as possible. That's what's going on. So why they're trying to betray Brexit, why they're trying to destroy the Nordstream pipeline. So on the other side of it, I just wrote an article, just published it, wrote it yesterday actually, sat on it overnight, cleaned it up this morning, and just published it over at both Halsey News and my site over at goldgoatsandguns.com. goldgoatsandguns.com. That Macron and Merkel are in, that Merkel in particular is in serious trouble because she's beginning to understand that if Germany is going to survive the shifts in geopolitical winds, or for lack of a better term, in order for Germany to carve out a path where it still, one, leads the EU, and two, can carve out its own independent path from the United States, it needs the Nord Stream pipeline. And it needs to extricate itself politically from the shit show that is Ukraine, that they helped create. Because look, the original plan in Ukraine, from everybody's perspective, was we're going to foment a coup, we're going to take control of the gas supply, the gas transit coming across Ukraine, and then force Gazprom to basically sell Europe gas at unprofitable levels. That was the goal. And to be able to then put U.S. anti-missile or offensive missile batteries, because our anti-missile systems can be used offensively, which is why the Russians are so adamant that you're not moving anti-missile systems onto our fucking border. But the goal is, of course, to do that in order to force Russia to stand down. Moreover, because the closer we can get our missiles to the Russians is the greater probability that we can flood their airspace and overwhelm their far superior anti-missile systems. Okay? It's simply a matter of numbers and time. So Merkel knows that once Ukraine failed and the Donbass split off and the crazies are in charge of Ukraine and they're bogged down in a war that makes everybody look bad, and the Ukraine is now a basket case that cannot take care of itself, doesn't have the Ukrainian government that is being supported by the IMF, the US, and the EU, which they can't afford. It's a big quagmire. They're angry at Putin for helping support this quagmire because they're having to continue to dump billions of dollars into this, and they're getting nothing in return for it because Gazprom has effectively shut off gas supply through Ukraine. The existing Nordstream pipeline is overcoming this, and the Yamal LNG terminal up on the was it Barents Sea? Not the Barents Sea. The far eastern, the north of St. Petersburg, is now supplying gas to Europe. Marginal supplies of gas to Europe, especially during this very cold winter, which is the other part of the reason why the Brits are so angry, because they can't even. They're supposed to be such a big oil and gas producer, but the North Sea is drying up, and they're having to buy marginal gas supplies from the hated Russians. This is really embarrassing for everybody. And so, our press is all filled with, oh, well, the United States sold a tanker of LNG to Poland at an unbelievable freaking price. Oh, look, we've achieved energy security for Europe. No, you haven't. You just ensured that Europe is going to not be competitive from an energy input perspective for a generation if you kill the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and Gazprom shuts down the old pipelines and doesn't transit any gas through Ukraine. The Russians will then turn around, take all of that gas, and they'll sell it to the Chinese. They'll sell it south into Central Asia. They've got plenty of places for the gas. Moreover, Gazprom doesn't necessarily have to have more. And Gazprom is already an incredibly successful company that, given everything, throws off a 7% dividend every year, guys. And it's a state-run organization. It's not even like well-run. It's run by a government, for fuck's sake. And it still throws off 7% every year. 5 to 7%, depending on the price of the ruble or whatever. But I got news for you. Going forward, I expect this year's distribution announcement from Gazprom to be anywhere in the 7 to 7.5% range. It's not even preferred stock. You can get that off an ADR, for fuck's sake. I mean, and we're still not talking about Power of Siberia 2, a second pipeline to China under the massive contract that they signed, deal that they signed back in 2014. There's still negotiations over that. And there's more than, we're talking about North Korean peace, Gazprom, gas pipeline across the Korean peninsula down to South Korea, who are desperate for piped gas. Same thing with the Japanese. The Japanese want a pipeline to the mainland through the Kuril Islands. The thing that we keep telling the Japanese they're not allowed to sign a peace treaty for World War II over. These are the things that we're dealing with. These are the realities of the situation. But Gazprom's got plenty of market opportunities going forward. We're not even talking about Turkstream coming online. It's being built. And now we got Erdogan going completely off the reservation to the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, whatever, going completely off the reservation, demanding the repatriation of the rest of Turkey's gold from the Fed. Because he needs to shore up the capital reserve of the Turkish banking system. Because gold reserves, banks are allowed to hold in Turkey, they're allowed to hold gold as a reserve asset at par. You're not allowed to do that in the Western banking system. It's all held at a discount. Gold is still not a fully tier 1 capital asset, which is why banks don't hold gold. They hold dollars, they hold debt, they hold shitty sovereign debt, and that's purely a what's the word I'm looking for? Purely a legislative fiat scenario. Banks were not unbelievably regulated if they were honest brokers, honest businesses being run by their management's best, with their management running it in the bank's best interest and shareholders' best interest. They would hold gold as part of their reserves. Be silly not to. And financial regulations, Basel II and Basel III regulations, international banking regulations, reasserted gold. Basel III reinserted gold as not a full tier 1 capital asset, but something close to it. But it's still just terribly disadvantaged. Now, if you're Russian bank and you don't have to hold the Basel III guidelines, well, I got news for you. They're holding gold. The Russian central bank is holding tons and tons of gold. So it puts them in a very good position in case there's a sovereign debt crisis. And all of this is obviously pushing towards, all of these things are pushing towards a complete political meltdown in Europe and an eventual sovereign debt crisis. So the meetings this week between Trump and Macron and Trump and Merkel are going to be interesting. I expect Merkel to actually acquiesce. I mean, if she stands up to Trump and decides to go her own way and allows the growing chorus behind her within Germany to lift anti-Russian sanctions, well, I just don't see that happening. But she could. And she's been trying to play this game where, well, I'm a good NATO satrap. I'm a good member of NATO, in good standing, and I believe in our mutual security partnership. But at the same time, they're very reluctant partners officially for continuing anti-Russian sanctions. I mean, there's a lot of very prominent German politicians who are allowed to say, look, these sanctions don't serve our interests. And no less a politician than Horst Seehofer, who's the head of the CSU and the governor of Bavaria, the most powerful state in Germany, one of the most powerful men in Germany, has met with Putin multiple times over the last 4 years. German businesses are figuring out ways to get around the sanctions in order to invest in Crimea and other places. So there's still the opportunity here. There's still a desire on the part of the German industrialists to see the opportunity that exists with a Russian ruble trading at 60 to the dollar, or worse, 75 to the euro versus like 40 or 35 as it was 4 years ago. I mean, there's so many opportunities here for the Germans to go in and take advantage of cheap, really cheap, high quality Russian labor. And they're being kept from doing so because of U.S. sanctions. And anytime the Germans try to get off the reservation, the United States adds more sanctions to Russia. Try and make it even harder. We are absolutely committed at this point to stopping the Nordstream 2 pipeline to the point where we're willing to risk thermonuclear war with the Russians over it. That's how important it is. And the fact that we're willing to expend almost every erg of political capital that we have on the international stage to stop this pipeline should tell you just how desperate and how fragile we are. All right. That sounds like a show. So, it's Sunday morning. We'll see what happens on Monday and Tuesday. The markets will probably be calm early part of this week. I don't see anything on the horizon. I don't see anything politically this weekend that tells me that there's going to be any volatility on Monday, though who knows. If there is any volatility on Monday, always look for turnaround Tuesday. And we'll see what's happening. Right now, gold and silver are kind of virtue signaling that they want to start a new bull market, but they're not really actually doing so. So that continues. The Bitcoin markets look stronger than they have since for the last couple of months because tax selling season here in the United States is over. That's about it. If I had anything truly interesting to report in the markets, other than the fact that the 210 spread is down to 50 freaking basis points for Christ's sake, which is insane, I would, but I don't. So that should do. Y'all have a great afternoon. If you have not subscribed, please do so. If you're watching today, please like the video. It really helps to get it out to other people on Twitter and other places. And if you want to be notified directly of the next time I'm going to go live, then you have to go into your notifications on YouTube, click the little bell or your settings, and go into the settings and turn it to always on so that you get an email and or ping on your phone to let you know when I'm going to go live. And if you do like what you hear here, you can support my work over at Patreon via at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns. I've got a $4 pledge, which gets you to the private blog and access to our private Slack channel and community where I'm available literally 24/7. Or you can sign up at $12 a month for the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter. If you sign up at any level, you get the first issue free, which will explain my portfolio strategy for disaster style investing to help de-stress you through a distinctly stressful period of history. And guys, you have a great afternoon. Enjoy your Sunday. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.